Happy Tuesday, happy winter. We're going to get started today. Before we get to our formal agenda, I'm actually going to turn this over to City Manager for an announcement, and then we will get moving.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Thank you for being here this morning. We've been monitoring the weather conditions over the past couple of days. Last night we had an interagency call with the Road Commission, County Sheriff's Office, and the Rapid along with city staff. And I'm going to ask the fire chief and and our Public Works Director, James Hurt, to come and give us a situation update in light of what's going on, and then we would ask the commission to consider whether or not it is vital to have the meeting this evening. Matter of fact, our staff recommendation is that we do not ask the public to come out given the current conditions. So, Chief and James, if you'll give us a current situation update.
Yes, thank you. So the governor has declared a state of emergency. This is not necessarily something that is because we're panicking and because there's a lot of bad things happening. It's because she needs to do that in order to open up some state funding available to local entities that would then be able to apply for that should they have some implications or some negative impacts from this weather system. So locally, we've been in good communication with the county schools and the transportation systems, and we've done 3 conference calls in the last 24 hours. Spoke with the National Weather Service today. We're expecting another 2 to 3 inches of snow into this evening, and James can update you on what that implication is to his street cleaning ability. But our local shelters, right now we have good capacity during the daytime hours, but it's in the evening hours where we're being stretched pretty thin at Mel Trotter. We're at capacity there. They are not turning anybody away. We are working closely with them to make sure that we have a safe environment for those folks. And I think as long as we get through this week, then this is kind of a critical time for us there. Operationally, I believe that in contacting all departments that we are actually seeing not too much of an impact right now citywide to operations. I would say that we do have some concerns when it comes to broken pipes and frozen pipes, and we are getting a number of calls like that into 311, but those are mainly residential. We've had some commercial pipes at this time, and we expect as we go into the thaw of the weekend, we'll see much more of that. The Rapid has let us know just recently that they are in good operations. They're just having a little bit of trouble getting around town because of the slippery conditions. And as far as a impact to tonight and tomorrow, I believe that we have one concert at the Van Andel tonight that is disco. Josh, what is it? Panic at the Disco, which we're expecting about 11,000 people there. At this time, they have no intentions of canceling, and so we will concentrate some efforts around that area to make sure that that's a safe environment for those folks to be able to get in and out of. And I think the last thing I would say is that we've had good messaging around public safety and around getting the information out to the public on what it is that we can do to keep ourselves safe, and asking that they be very cautious when they look at alternative heating ways during this cold snap as a result of carbon monoxide issues and also the potential for fire and the exposure to the elements and frostbite in less than 15 minutes as we reach these temperatures that could be negative 30 to 49 degrees in wind chill. And I'll let James take over and give you an update on streets.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners.
Good morning.
As you know, the road conditions are a little slippery this morning. Our crew spent most of the day yesterday trying to maintain first attentions. Yesterday morning was tough. We had a hard time keeping up with the snowfall and the blowing snow. It really caused us some problems. We were able to get most of that cleaned up yesterday afternoon and evening. We transitioned into local streets. We got through nearly half of that overnight. But as a result, some of the major streets looked a little slippery this morning. We had some trouble getting around. I'm very concerned about putting down a lot of treatment right now as far as salt, because that's going to freeze with this cold temperatures coming. We're recommending not putting down salt. We're only putting it where it's absolutely necessary. We are using a mixture of some sand and salt to get some traction, because that seems to be one of the struggles we're having with a number of motorists. As Chief mentioned, this weekend we're having a warm-up, potentially some rain on Sunday. That's going to cause a lot of havoc for us. with the catch basins. So one of our goals is try to get to the curb as much as we can in the local street system so that we can avoid this ponding that may happen depending on what the temperatures do and if we truly do get some rain. But just know we're out there. Our goal is to try to get through all the local system by this evening. We're probably going to be going back through the locals over the next couple of days. And just so you're aware, commissioners, we're going to be putting on our front plows just because the banks are so high, which means we're going to be pushing snow into people's driveways. Unfortunately, we don't have any other option right now. We try not to put the front plows on, but it's necessary because we need to get back to that curb.
And so, just want to confirm with Chief Kittle that we've not had any other major wrecks and incidents while he's coming up. But I do want to also confirm it is the staff's position that we do not present any risk to the public by asking, our recommendation would be not to present any risk to the public by asking them to come tonight for a city commission meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yep.
Okay. Chief?
Sir, we are not seeing any more impactful accidents than we would normally in a winter storm like this at this time.
And Mayor and Commissioners, we've also canceled all recreation programs for tonight and tomorrow as well.
Okay, great. And I'm sure we've all heard Grand Rapids Public Schools closed, Grand Valley's closed. A number of organizations have closed for both today and tomorrow. And so, Commissioners, I don't think we need do we need a formal motion to cancel the meeting tonight? City Attorney?
I believe we should, because
Okay.
we've given notice.
Okay.
and it's out there that we're having it.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for a motion to cancel our meeting tonight. What that will mean is we will have our standing committees this morning. We'll still have public safety at 11:30, but then everything that was on the agenda for tonight will get moved to our next evening meeting, and we'll combine those two meetings at this meeting, the meetings this morning, and the ones at our next meeting. Standing committee meetings will be combined in our next evening meeting. Okay?
City Attorney asked it, the impact of that, and I've been assured by staff that all the items, there would be no significant operational impact by delaying them to the next committee meeting.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, we didn't have any scheduled public hearings tonight, and so that no scheduled public hearings would be impacted. Okay?
In our efforts to get notice out to the community.
And we will work diligently. I'm sure Amy is already working in the back to make sure that this gets out to all the media outlets so that people are well aware and they don't attempt to come down here to find that a meeting has been canceled. So we'll work really hard to get that out so that people are aware. All right, so with that, can I get a motion then for the cancellation of our evening meeting tonight due to inclement weather?
Support.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. We should also note, James, I know that yesterday a number of areas were closed down, including Michigan Street Hill was closed. Is there a way to notify, not just us, but make sure that that gets out more quickly, maybe?
Yeah. That was a decision by the police department with having so many cars having trouble getting up the hill.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so much the snow,
Makes sense.
it was icy, that we couldn't get any traction. But yeah, we can certainly work on getting the communication out to you.
Okay, that would be helpful. I anticipate with the weather, or with the temperatures dropping significantly, that we're going to have some very, very icy roads. And so the
I'm hoping not.
streets where we have hills tend to be the most problematic. And so if you can avoid those and take some back roads, this is the beauty of having a grid system, is that there are multiple options, and some options are better than others.
Yes, Mayor, I'm getting very reliable reports that there's still people having difficulty getting up the hill.
We have firsthand experience around this table. Any other final comments before we get moving on our agenda, and then we'll trust our communications team to get the word out that our evening meeting has been canceled. All right, Commissioner?
Just want to say a huge thank you, James, to you and to
Yes.
your staff for being out there snow plowing, to all of our first responders, those who are collecting our refuse, and to our residents, because honestly, I did not get one call yesterday. I think people recognize that this is an extraordinarily unusual situation, so I have not been getting calls about, please come and de-ice or plow my streets, or complaints about sidewalks. So to those masses of residents listening, thank you.
Yeah. And it's a good reminder that if you can stay home, just hunker down for a day or two, stay home, give us time to clear the streets. Don't risk getting out in the streets and getting stuck. With the temperatures, the warnings are even 10, 15 minutes outside can result in frostbite. So we want to be really mindful of that. In addition to thanking all of the staff who've been working so hard, I just want to say thank you to all of our community partners who are making sure that we have warming shelters throughout our city. If you have a neighbor that you're concerned about, please check in on them. And then also do your best, although we know that it's difficult, do your best to clear those sidewalks to make sure that those are safe as well. So it's a community effort on days like today. All right, so next that will take us to our first item, and this is our fiscal year 2018 audit wrap-up. So I'm going to turn to our City Comptroller, Sarah Vanderwerf, to get us started on this. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. I am pleased to present the annual financial report. We delivered the books to your
Thank you.
boxes, so hopefully you had a chance to read them all weekend. So I would like to take a few seconds. I know we're on a tight schedule, but I would like to thank our Deputy Comptroller, Ruth Leaders, who has put this together for us for 15 years now. I believe today is her anniversary. So given the new and some of us who are not so new anymore in this room, I think she probably knows more about the financials than any of us. So she is a wealth of information and has done this through 2 financial management system implementations. So I think if you add the extra time doing that, she probably has 25 years with the city. And of course, I would like to thank the rest of the staff who put this together for us. So we have representatives with us from Plant Moran today. We have Joe Kowalski, who came in from the Detroit area, and Marie Stiegel, if you would like to come up and give us your report.
Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm Joe Kowalski, partner with Plant Moran, and one of the partners on the audit of the city. Thank you for having us here today. I have with me Marie Stiegel, who's the senior manager on the audit engagement, and we're just going to take a couple of minutes to run you through the results of the audit very quickly. Just quickly to kind of recap our deliverables, we have the audit opinion on the CAFR, the audit opinion on the audit of the federal grants, and then the audit opinions on the 7 component units and the joint ventures. This is our first year as the city's auditor, and we were very impressed with the professionalism and knowledge of the entire team. And just want to second Sarah's comments about Ruth. Couldn't have done it without you, Ruth, so thank you very much for your help. We did issue an unmodified opinion. That is our highest form of assurance that an auditor can give. It's a clean audit opinion. The audit went very well, and I'm going to ask Marie to just walk you through our letter to the commissioners and the results of the audit.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
As Joe mentioned, one of the deliverables that you have in your packet is a letter to the commissioners. Auditing standards would require us to communicate with you both at the beginning and the end of the audit. So if you remember in the late summer, we presented at the onset of the audit, and now this is our end of audit communications. Many of the communications in that letter are standard or boilerplate, so I'm not going to speak to everything in there. I'm going to try to hit the highlights related to this audit of the year ended June 30th, 2018. The city did adopt a new accounting standard that was GASB 75. And in basic terms, what that required the city to do was to record on their balance sheet a liability for basically the unfunded portion of post-retirement healthcare benefits, OPEB, as you might hear it called. This didn't impact the general fund or any governmental funds, but it was recorded. We reviewed all the calculations that were done to ensure that was properly recorded, and the new footnote disclosures were included properly in the CAFR. We do note that for every audit that we do, there are certain estimates that go into preparing the CAFR. The most significant of those estimates that we note in our letter to you relate to the assumptions and methodologies used in the calculation of the net pension and net OPEB obligations. Actuaries are involved to do those calculations, so we review any assumptions or methodologies that they're using to ensure that those are reasonable. We were comfortable with all the assumptions that were used. We just continue to encourage management to review those on an annual basis to make sure no changes need to be made to those assumptions. There were certain items presented in the financial statements. We didn't identify anything that needed to be adjusted as part of our audit. I would say, Joe, that's pretty rare to not identify any auditor adjustments at all, so that's a credit to the team. There were just certain items that we do call out in the letter where there could be an alternative presentation. None of these items were considered material individually or in the aggregate. We just note those for informational purposes. That would relate to the presentation of internal cost allocations as transfers, or the presentation of unavailable revenue as netted against AR. A minor item related to separate corridor improvement authorities lumped into one column, and a gross presentation of certain items related to the pension liability deferral. So again, none of those items were considered needing adjustment or material to the financial statements. Finally, as part of our audit, we obtained representations from management that the information they provided to us was complete and accurate to the best of their knowledge. We reviewed any parts of the CAFR that we don't offer an opinion in, such as the statistical information or the introductory information, and we didn't note any items where those were inconsistent with information in the CAFR. Finally, our letter does provide other informational legislative update items and information on upcoming accounting pronouncements. We'll work with management, of course, to implement those new pronouncements, but those are just presented for your information unless there's any questions that you would like to present us with on that. So again, greatly thank management and the city staff for all their assistance during the audit, and unless there's any questions, that concludes our presentation.
All right, I'll see if there's questions. I'll start not with a question, but a comment, and then maybe my question is for our comptroller. One, it's always nice to get a clean audit, so that's wonderful. Thank you to all the staff who worked hard in order to make that possible. I do always like to point out that under the letter, it's really clear that under city's financial position, that we're in a stable financial position and that we're exceeding the level of financial reserves that is commonly recommended. I think that really goes to our commitment to make sure that we are in a sound fiscal position and prepared if, in fact, we do experience an economic downturn. So those are nice things to point out. So thank you for your work on that. And then I know that historically we've created kind of a shortened version that the community, for the CAFR, that I know many of us kind of push out to the community so that they don't have to read this entire very riveting book.
It's coming.
Are you, okay, wonderful. I just wanted to follow up, and if you could send that to us, we'll help spread the word.
Absolutely, yeah. As soon as that becomes available, we'll make it available to everyone. I believe we're waiting for templates from the state for the current year, so we'll get that out, and we can bring it back to committee of the whole if you like. If you want to see the highlights, I put some of them in my memo. So everything was up this year, so we've been fortunate. It was a good year.
Thank you. The memo was great, and I know I always appreciate, and I know the community does, the report that you put out that kind of takes all of the key information and kind of hones it down and makes it easy to understand and digest. So if you're not familiar, the Comptroller's Office has been doing that for a number of years, and we really appreciate it.
Since 2012.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, Commissioners, any other comments or questions? All right, thank you. Thank you all. All right, so next, that will take us to our next item, and this is a resolution designating the Grand Rapids Lunar New Year celebration, a special event, and permitting the discharge of consumer-grade fireworks. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Support.
All right, this seems pretty straightforward, but I'll let Ms. Pittman share anything that she thinks we should know.
Good morning, and so glad to see everyone here and that we all made it safely. This is straightforward. It is the Chinese New Year, the Lunar New Year celebration, second year in a row. They will be shooting off firecrackers, which are commercial grade. Consumer grade. This is why we have Ted Jensen here to talk about this.
Okay.
So, yeah.
They will be using consumer-grade fireworks, same kind that any person in the public can purchase at the local fireworks store. So it's really not a pyrotechnic device. It is, but essentially it's regulated differently. The difference is it's going to be on public land and not on the day of, day before, or day after a holiday. So that's why we need the permission.
Great, thank you. All right, commissioners, any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Next, that will take us to a resolution approving a request to the Kent County Drain Commission for additional monitoring of the Knapp's Corner District for an amount not to exceed $104,000.
So moved.
Support.
All right, Ms. Rivet, you want to tell us about this?
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners.
Morning.
This project, most of you have been hearing about for a very long time. From the time it was discovered there were chlorides in the water, even before we knew it could be tied to the pond at Knapp's Crossing, that was a drain commissioner's pond, our number one priority was to get the drinking water line undone again. That was done last fall, and residents have been able to hook up last year. That was a priority, even though the chlorides are not above any health-based criteria. Where this gets a little interesting is, originally we wanted the Drain Commissioner's Office to assess for the water main. However, in order for them to do that, it had to be tied with a drain improvement project. So if you remember, we came up with a drain improvement project, and that was in the ballpark of $7 million that was tied to the approximately $1 million water main, and that was presented as a bundle. In the meantime, we've been working very closely. We've invited all property owners to all stakeholder meetings we've had, but then we work very closely with 4 of the major property owners in the area. They came up with a plan and offered that as opposed to us assessing them, all the communities would pay what they would normally pay, and then as opposed to us assessing them or the Drain Commissioner's Office assessing us to pay, they would actually go together and pay the private portion on their own. In exchange, they asked for a little more time to do more research. All of the research we did for opportunities was on what we could do publicly. We can't control what's on the private property with the existing code. So we agreed to do that for them. Now, the city has gone ahead and agreed to pay for a study for capacity to find out what smaller drains in the area or what other opportunities we could do to figure out the capacity. At the same time, the property owners have come up with a contract for landscapers, and it was earlier this summer, that they've been trying to encourage the other property owners to all use these other methods that use less salt to see if they can improve the water quality. Improving the water quality will mean we have a lot more options. We can go to smaller water bodies. We can continue to use the pond. Many options are there. So they've been working on improving water quality. Some of the other property owners have also been working on ways they can infiltrate on site to reduce their actual runoff. Now we want to get to a study to find out if those improvements are making a difference in the water quality, and that's what this is for. Per request of the property owners, it's a relatively small amount that we normally wouldn't assess for, although honestly, the city has taken on a lot of studies on their own, and the budgets are starting to get tapped. But the property owners requested that we assess to try and get the attention of the other property owners to show them this really isn't an issue. Please come to the table and help and work with us too. So that was why we'd like to do the assessment through the Drain Commissioner's Office. It is a letter to the Drain Commissioner's Office asking for this as a maintenance. So go back, it's not actually going to be an assessment. They would invoice us like any maintenance, but we would still have the option to assess property owners. And like I said, that's being done to try and get the attention of the others. The major property owners have been trying to work with them also on their own, but just showing them this is a serious issue and we really need to pay attention by this smaller, and hoping to prevent paying these $7 million and having to assess that later.
Great, thank you. I know several of us are well aware. I know Commissioners Kelly and Jones have been actively involved in this, as was I, even when I was a commissioner. And so I'll say just, one, I want to thank everyone who came together and is working hard to find other solutions, and those who are taking this as a very serious issue. I appreciate that. I think this is a smart option for us as we look at ways to hopefully not only solve the problem, but prevent additional millions of dollars spent on infrastructure. So colleagues, do you have any additional questions about this?
Just a clarification then, that should this study show that these methods aren't working, or if we can't get everybody on board, then we do go back to the drain commissioner.
Very likely. I mean, we're hoping for any other possible alternative, but worst case is if we can't find another way, we'll have to go back to do a force main to the Grand River, because that capacity, well, dilution is not our first priority. That capacity can handle that amount of chloride, we believe.
And are the residents now, their water is good?
Anybody who wanted to connect is able to connect to the water main.
Okay, good. Thanks.
All right, Commissioners, any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution approving a recreational passport grant agreement with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources in an amount of $150,000 for improvements at Riverside Park.
So moved.
Support?
All right, so we have a number of these before us, and David, I'm just going to try to get through them pretty quickly because they're all pretty straightforward, but do you want to add anything about this one?
You bet. The first one is a grant agreement with the MDNR for $150,000 grant award for Riverside Park. This is for an easy launch accessible kayak component that we're building in addition to some other park improvements up at Riverside.
Great. Commissioners, any questions?
Good news.
All right, I'll say, I know we have a few others before us, but I want to say publicly how much we appreciate our partnership with the Trust Fund. They've been able to work with us on a number of these projects, so I'm eager to see these applications submitted, and hopefully we'll receive some support from them again this year. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution to set a public hearing for the 2019 Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund grant application for parkland acquisition.
Support.
All right, David, you want to tell us about this?
Yes, this is a parkland acquisition for approximately 1 acre of land in the Plaza Roosevelt development. This is over on Ward 1 on the west side of the city. Park deficient area is identified in the park's master plan, and so this would go quite a ways to offset that deficiency within this neighborhood and ensure that we're connecting children to our park spaces within a 10-minute walk.
Thank you. And it is aligned with the vision for Plaza Roosevelt, which I know all of us have been actively aware of and supportive of, I should say. So this would be a great addition to that development.
Indeed.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right. Next is a resolution to set a public hearing for the 2019 Michigan Natural Resource Trust Fund grant application for the Hastings Non-Motorized Trail, Phase 2.
So moved.
Support?
Great. So this is trail connectivity through the MDNR in addition to other sources of funding. The MDNR Trust Fund request is for $300,000 to support a roughly $1.2 million project. This is connectivity from our neighborhoods along trails down to our river corridor and to our regional trail connections from that point forward.
Great. Commissioners, any questions or comments?
Just one comment. I understand that there's another grant, Dopplet Family Trail Development Fund, and I hope we can convey that to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, because that might help leverage this.
Absolutely.
And thanks to Kim for going after that. Kim Dixon.
And Commissioner, this is the trail, this was the design that is ADA compliant?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And it'll give us another way down the hill.
Good, 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 good. All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution to set a public hearing for the 2019 MDNR Trust Fund application for Garfield Park.
So moved.
Support?
All right, David?
Great. So this last one is a request of funding for a splash pad at Garfield Park. This was identified as a part of the planning process back in 2014 with the neighborhood and with millage funds being spread across the city and all of our city's parks. We are going back for this request, and the neighborhood has really rallied around this one and agreed to raise the funds to support the match that is necessary for this grant.
Great. All right, any questions? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, thank you, David.
Thank you.
All right, so next it'll take us to a resolution approving a brownfield plan amendment for Division and Weston LLC for a project located at 35 and 41 South Division Avenue.
Support.
All right.
Good morning,
Good
Mayor and
morning.
Commissioners. Good morning. Attached today in your agenda packet is a resolution approving a brownfield plan amendment filed by Division and Weston LLC, an entity affiliated with Rockford Construction for redevelopment of a project proposed at 35 and 41 South Division. This is a block south of the intersection of Fulton and Division, which currently is vacant. A couple buildings which were demolished in 2014, I believe, due to structural issues. The developer proposes a three-story mixed-use building containing 22 apartments and 2,200 square feet of ground floor retail space. It's approximately a $4 million project and proposes 10 full-time equivalent jobs at average wages of approximately $17 per hour.
Great. Commissioners, we had a public hearing on this. I think we're all familiar with this. I often call it a hole in the ground on Division. So, any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, next it'll take us to a resolution scheduling a public hearing on the Uptown Business Improvement District Plan. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. So the action before you is a request to schedule a public hearing on the necessity of the Uptown Business Improvement District Plan. This is a request that's come before you many times before, so this would essentially be a renewal. As required by city code, a map is included in the plan. This is all required by Chapter 10 in Title I of the city code. The difference this year is that this is a two-year plan. Previously, you've approved 6 times a one-year plan. The Uptown Business Improvement District feels like they've revised the plan and gotten the assessment right at this point, and so they feel comfortable recommending to you a two-year plan. The total assessment would be approximately $120,000 to fund continued work such as streetscape maintenance, trash pickup, business development programming, and corridor management. The rate stays the same as last year, which is $5.46 per linear foot for non-exempt property and government property. There's a half rate for nonprofit properties, and then there are several special properties that front on 2 streets, and those are all clearly laid out in the plan. The hearing on necessity would be the first step in the process. This would take us through March, and then the city assessor would begin putting together the roll, and there would be a public hearing on that as well. Given the fact that there will not be a meeting tonight to confirm this, I would ask that you would consider amending the resolution to schedule the public hearing for March 5th as opposed to February 26th. That would be, that will allow us to complete the process according to the timeline, which has a goal of getting the assessments, if approved, out with the summer tax bill. And then what this does is allows us enough time to get the notices out as required.
All right, thank you. All right, Commissioners, so any questions about this? And then I'll open it up and see if one of you are willing to make an amendment to change the date till March 5th.
No questions?
All right.
I'll move to amend this to a public hearing on March 5th.
Support.
All right, so I will call the question for the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, thank you. All right, so next, so Commissioners, that's our last action item, and then our last item before we go into executive session. So I should remind you, we do have an executive session today, so I'll call for that immediately after this meeting is over, and we'll go down to room 601, and that is for 2 issues, one related to pending litigation and one for a legal opinion. But before we close our committee of the whole, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about an update on the implications on the decision made by the Kent County Commission to dissolve the Kent County Land Bank Authority. So this is an update so that all of us can be briefed and updated on where we are today and some of the things that we're going to have to work on moving forward as we figure out our next steps. So I'll turn it to City Manager to get us started.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. As you're aware, the county made a decision to wind down the land bank in December, and it happened so rapidly, we never had an opportunity to brief the commission publicly. So this is our first opportunity to have a public discussion about the current status of the land bank and our future plans. I want to thank Deputy City Manager Eric DeLong for his leadership in working with Kara and Jono and other staff to making sure that the city's interest is represented. We've been having conversations with the Land Bank Authority as well as the county and trying to make sure that our goal was to prevent the dissolution. But the initial conversations they were having was around 6 months, and the mayor and I had a conversation to see if we can extend the period to at least a year, and they have agreed to that. So today we want to talk about the current status, our path forward, and then, as the mayor mentioned, reserve those other legal matters for closed session. Eric.
Thank you, City Manager Washington. So first, it's probably good to reflect on the timeline of the land bank. So it was formed in November of 2009, and we had our first contract with them 4 years later for tax foreclosed properties. That relationship proceeded well. It was a good way for us to manage tax foreclosed properties and get them back into productive use in the community, and that worked well. And we started experimenting with affordable housing requirements, and we learned a lot through that process. So in May of 2017, the county completed a review of the land bank. There was a formal official subcommittee process. Testimony was taken, and they published their recommendations. Those recommendations were filed, I would imagine. And then in December of 2018, the recommendations were reviewed. The performance of the land bank was reviewed by the county administrator, and it was determined that the land bank was not meeting the recommendations of the subcommittee report that had been filed in May of 2017. So things began happening quite rapidly at that point. So you can see that within the space of roughly a week, the land bank was shut down, and the wind down. Okay. Less than a week.
Less than.
Okay, so it's all there on the dates. And within that period of time, though, City Manager Washington was able to intervene along with the mayor to request a longer wind down period, which the county agreed to, and that will be quite helpful for us as we move forward. So that decision caused us to do three things. One is to evaluate our current relationship with the land bank. So we've got 165 properties that the land bank owns that we'll talk about in a few minutes within the city. We want to figure out what to do with those properties. We want to also then think about how the city itself does property management on a going forward basis. We were working into a good system. This causes us to have to rethink that and pivot. And also, we want to pause on final action on the Affordable Housing Community Fund until we figure out how we're pivoting and what role the fund may play in that new future for us. So, as I've said, we've had a good partnership with the land bank. We've got a lot done, and the work isn't done yet. We've got a year to go, and while the majority of the work has been within the city of the land bank, we have the majority of the properties the land bank still owns are also within the land bank, and so we have to figure out what to do with those. And that's where the 12-month wind-down period works for us, and also gives us time to consider other land banking strategies in conjunction with the city attorney and our other partners. So here's a map that displays the properties within the city of Grand Rapids. You can see the blue dots are the 146 properties that are covered by the 7 agreements, and the red dots are 19 properties that the land bank acquired within the city from other sources. And so we'll be talking to the land bank about the totality of those properties as part of the wind down process. So as I've said, we have 7 agreements. We've talked about the number of properties. We'll be evaluating that entire portfolio. Some of them are development ready properties. many of them are side lots. And they were side lots that we had trouble doing something with, and we asked them to help with, which they willingly did. And, we're trying to figure out what to do with those on a going forward basis. So there's a lot of sorting and thinking to do about those properties. There are also some affordable housing projects that they had underway that are not done. Those need to be completed. We have to work through that. And this is an opportunity during this year wind down to see just how much more production we can do together through this process. So in terms of the Affordable Housing Community Fund, the initial framework was established as part of the Housing Now process. We approved a term sheet in March. Work began on the structure of that, including the bylaws, the 501c3, and making appointments. Many appointments have been made, and the Affordable Housing Community Fund has had several meetings under the guidance of the CEO of the Housing Commission, Carlos Sanchez. We've, based on City Manager Washington's memo to the Affordable Housing Fund, the Housing Commission, the City Commission, and the Executive Director, we were paused action on further implementation of the Affordable Housing Community Fund until we can figure out how it all works together with what we're doing with our affordable housing future. There is a role, though, for the fund. So next steps are these. So we will be evaluating our current agreements with the Land Bank and how we wind those down. We will work to secure control in some form of the properties that were former city properties that are now owned by the Land Bank, and we'll also talk about the other 19 properties as well. We'll pause going forward on the Affordable Housing Community Fund until we know what that future should be, and we'll complete research with the City Attorney's Office about our next steps in affordable housing. And all this will be rolled into work that the city manager is leading on the strategic plan process and also on the fiscal 2020 budget. So that is where we are today, and we'll be working on next steps over the next year. And I'm open for any questions or comments.
Well, I'll start. So one, I want to thank Eric and all of the city staff who responded quickly and had conversations and attended all of the meetings in December at the county. And then those who have been meeting and working on this since the decision was made by the county board.
Thank you.
I know it was a lot of work, so thank you. I also want to say thank you to Commissioner Rapart. He was appointed to serve on the Kent County Land Bank, and he'll serve in that role through the transition period and be our liaison as we work through this process. So thank you. I know they have a meeting coming up in February, and this will, I'm sure, be top of mind and on the agenda at their first meeting of the year. So I just want to say thank you to Commissioner Rapart for doing that. So I'll open it up for questions or additional comments. I don't know if the city manager has anything additional he would like to add.
No, Mayor, I think just from a strategy in keeping housing affordable, it's very important that we find ways to continue to have access to this development tool. So that's our goal. We don't quite know all the answers yet. We'll be figuring it out, but we have time to do it.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, any additional questions or thoughts? Commissioner?
Yeah, I just want to say that as we consider this, and I thank you to Commissioner Rapart for serving on the Land Bank, that we continue to to remember our priorities around mixed income, home ownership and wealth creation, and just ask the manager to help us sort through those priorities as we make decisions going forward about the land bank. And then whatever we can do to update those who are waiting and have been waiting for some time to get this process rolling is great. And this is a great first start. Thank you for this.
Great, good point.
Yeah, I just want to mention I'm gonna meet offline with the folks from that Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We appointed 4 amazing folks to that, and I'm just gonna meet with them to keep them at the table because hopefully, like you said, Eric, there is a role for them. That fund is going to play a role in the future, but hopefully we can maintain those 4 really high quality individuals to help us through this. And so we're just going to have a meeting to just kind of stay connected in the process in a couple of weeks.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner?
Just a question, the 19 properties that are not from the city, in your presentation, you said that they were covered by several different agreements. I don't understand what those agreements were primarily because I don't have them. Can you just give me an idea of what those agreements were?
Sure. The 146 properties, the ones are the ones covered by the 7 agreements between the city and the land bank. And those agreements provided for how the properties would be managed, what the requirements, performance requirements were for the land bank. The later requirement or contracts required some affordable housing goals that we were experimenting with the land bank. And so that takes care of the bulk of the properties. The 19 properties that they acquired from other sources didn't come through the city of Grand Rapids. They acquired them in other ways. They might have been environmentally contaminated properties, or some might have been gifted to them. We're not exactly sure. So that's part of what the wind down process will be, is figuring out, okay, what productive value do those 19 properties have, and how can we get them back into circulation?
Yeah, I asked that question because the majority of those properties are in the 3rd Ward.
Yes, and and if they are, and if you look at the scattergram of the map, most of the properties are in what we would call neighborhoods of focus. So, so we just need to be cognizant of that, and that's why it's a priority for us.
Yeah, that's why I'm still kind of cloudy on what those agreements were. So maybe I can talk
Sure.
a little later about that because.
I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can get you all that background information, and I know Dave Allen also can provide information if you're curious about those other properties, and as Eric said, they were acquired through different ways, bank-owned, some of them there is contamination, and so it's a mix. It's a mix.
I am aware that there is one building on Eastern Avenue that has been contaminated for years and nothing has been done about it, so that might be one of your 19, I'm not sure. That's why I need to have some kind of documentation so that I know what those buildings are.
We'll get you that.
Be happy to share that with you.
Yep, agreed. City Manager?
Yes, in response to Commissioner Kelly and Commissioner Reppart's comments about the Affordable Housing Community Fund, I did have conversation with Carlos Sanchez, Executive Director for the Housing Commission, about both our appreciation for the effort so far. We've had several conversations, as well as the need to reevaluate our strategy using the fund and those assets in light of the changing landscape around the land bank. And what he has requested is that the city staff come and formally update the board on, I think it's February the 7th.
February 7th, yeah.
And we will make sure that staff is there. If I can't be present, we'll make sure the appropriate staff is there to have that dialogue and give them an update of what's occurred based on our conversation today.
Thank you. All right, Commissioners, so we will, I anticipate we'll get regular updates as we continue to determine legally what our options are, as well as what works as we work through this transition. And again, also take the lead from the Land Bank Board, which also will be making decisions about not just the properties that exist within our city, but they have properties throughout the entire county. And so it's a priority for us this year, and I anticipate we're going to have, many of us will be spending a lot of time on figuring out next steps. So thank you. All right, thank you. All right, Commissioners, with that, I'm going to call for a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Support.
All right, and this is a roll call. So Commissioner
Yes.
Jones, O'Connor.
Yes.
Lanier. Yes. Kelly.
Yes.
Moody.
Yes.
And Repart.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go down to 6:01.